Hey everybody, welcome to the Ballet Rising videocast. Today I'm really excited to be speaking to an old friend of mine from my dancing days back in Seattle. He was a very accomplished dancer, having danced with the Pacific Northwest Ballet and the Houston Ballet. He's now a very accomplished teacher with Broadway Dance Center in New York City. He's also an award-winning choreographer and the artistic director of his own company, Movement Headquarters Ballet. He's also, on top of all of that, a very accomplished writer, having written numerous articles for various dance-based publications. I wanted to speak to him today about an article he wrote a little while back called "What are the Implications of Offering Free Dance Online?" It was published in Dance Magazine earlier this year, and I thought it would be a really interesting subject to talk to him about. He did a lot of research on the subject and has a lot of really interesting insight about what's happening here during and after the COVID-19 situation that we're all finding ourselves in. So, without further ado, let's welcome Barry Kerollis. And finally, here we are with Barry Kerollis. How are you, man? Great to see you.
I'm good. Good to see you too.
Yeah, man. It's been a long time. So we were just talking previously about how long it's been since we've seen each other. And it's been probably about a decade, right?
Yeah, back in the 2000s probably.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine that much time has passed, but you seem like you've done pretty well. You've been doing a lot of really impressive things. So I was looking through your CV and bio, and I was like, okay, this guy is just wearing all the hats. I thought just to lead us in here, let's just talk a little bit about you, who you are, where you're from. Where are you from? Tell us just a little bit about who you are.
Sure. I'm originally from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I was raised in the suburbs. I was more of a jazz competition kid in my training, and around the age of, I guess I was about 14 or 15 years old, Robert LaFosse from New York City Ballet came down and he choreographed a Nutcracker in a local company, and he cast me in that production, and they brought dancers from the School of American Ballet, and that's when I really started to fall in love with ballet. So at that point, I really started to transition my focus to ballet. And I trained at a local recreational school until I was 17 years old. So I didn't really have the background of a lot of professional dancers where they trained in very strict, intense ballet programs. I was pretty much like, I tapped for 3 hours one day, I did modern for an hour another day, I even did Irish step dancing. But yeah, so sorry?
All that diversity really in the end.
It really helped me out. And it's interesting because once I transitioned into the ballet portion of my career, I used it here and there, but it's actually benefited me a lot more after I left the stage.
Yeah.
Before I get to that, after that, I trained at the Kerollis Academy of Ballet, and then for a year, we both went there. Yep. And then then I went to School of American Ballet for a year before joining Houston Ballet, Pacific Northwest Ballet for 7 years, where we worked together. And then after a period of time, I was there 7 seasons. I wanted to sort of change it up and explore the more contemporary side of ballet. Mm-hmm. I joined Ballet X for a season, and then freelance across the country for 4 years before I retired.
Oh, wow.
So it's kind of like my professional performance career journey.
Yeah.
And what I tell people a lot is that, like, I always had these dreams and aspirations of what my professional career would be like, and like all of the roles I wanted to do and all of the accolades that I wanted to accrue. But what's been most fascinating for me has been that the transition into my post-performance dance career has actually fulfilled more of what I had hoped to have had during my professional career.
And you've been incredibly active, because I've followed a lot of your stuff as well. So I was thinking about how to introduce you, and I thought, this guy's wearing a million hats. you're kind of everywhere. So I've followed your blogs, I've followed numerous articles you've written, but now you're also a choreographer. You're an award-winning choreographer. How did you get into choreography, and where have you been working? What's that all about?
So choreography has been an interesting path for me. I always tell people that once I retired, it took me, I wasn't like a traditional retirement. Like I didn't have a traditional retirement. It's not like I had a performance that I was like, this is my final show.
Yeah.
I had a almost like 1.5 2-year transition to get to the point where I am now.
I think you and I retired at the same time, because I was reading a lot of your stuff and I was going through the exact same thing. I didn't have a final performance either. I had a
really
sort of reading all of your stuff was kind of exactly what I was going through at the same time. It was pretty fascinating.
It is fascinating because it's really rare, especially for a dancer of your caliber that was able to rise to the highest ranks of multiple really renowned companies. That's almost expected that you're gonna have like the confetti drop and the flowers thrown and the partners coming and like kissing you and all that. So that's a completely different story, like that emotional aspect to it. But choreographically, I always say that I'm an accidental choreographer. I didn't think I was supposed to be a choreographer. Back when I was at the Kerollis Academy of Ballet, we moved into the Kerollis Academy of Ballet our year 2 days before September 11th happened.
Whoa. Wow.
Yeah, so it was a very traumatic transition for us. It's interesting because I've had some of that crazy traumatic experience during this quarantine time, and I've been revisiting how I felt being in Washington, D.C., seeing the Pentagon on fire the day of. But anyway, so we were very, very moved and affected by what happened on 9/11. And as our senior class is one of the bigger senior classes that went through the Kerollis Academy. So we had come together, we really wanted to do something. So we put together a remembrance performance that was going to benefit the family of a student in Washington, D.C. who had perished on one of the planes.
Wow.
And we completely put together the program. There were 4 seniors that were involved really in the programming, and all of us took a part in choreographing a little section of it.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so I decided I was like, I'm not a choreographer, but I'll choreograph like a jazz solo for myself. Like it was simple, 2 minutes, me. Didn't have to deal with anybody else. It was like, it'll be easy. I got about a minute into it and I couldn't handle it, and I asked my friend to choreograph the last minute of it. So I was like, choreography is not on my radar. It's not my specialty. But yeah, so then after that, there was a handful of years I didn't even think about choreographing, and then at P&B, I don't know if you remember, but they used to always put up a sign-up list for the choreographic workshop, which is now called Next. Yeah. And I had been sick the first few years I was at P&B, and it took me a little while to really establish myself. And I found that I wasn't really fulfilled with what I was doing. So I started seeking out different ways to find fulfillment. One of those ways I think was by becoming a union delegate for the American Guild of Musical Artists. Just to feel like I had a place in the company beyond this like dancer that didn't often get to dance in the first cast, not even the second cast for a lot of pieces. And so right around the same time that I started doing work with that, the sign up went up for that year. And I was like, you know what? I was like, I'm not casting this rep. I'm just understudying on the side. Like, I really just want something else to do. Maybe I'll just try it again. So I signed up, I went to the meeting, and I remember specifically asking Peter Bold, the director, if I don't want to finish this, do I have to follow through with it? This whole PTSD with what happened before. And he's like, well, yes, but no, you should pretty much assume that you're going to put it on stage. And I was like, okay, I'll try it. I did it. I really enjoyed it. And I felt like I had something to say, but I still had a lot to learn. And so I pretty much only did that for the next 4 years after that. And then my final season with P&B, I applied for the Seattle's Men in Dance Festival. And I ended up getting accepted, and they commissioned a very short piece. And at that point I was like, maybe this is something that I want to do for a living. And I remember actually having a conversation in my artistic evaluation with Peter Ball. And we always had a really good, straightforward relationship. And he was like, well, what do you want to do when you're done dancing? And I was like, I want to choreograph. And he was like, well, you should keep in mind that most people aren't Chris Wheeldon, and that while you can probably choreograph, you're going to have to think about a lot of other ways to make a living aside from just focusing on choreography. And like most kids, I wasn't a kid, but I felt like he was like the parent of P&B, and I was like one of the many children in the family. You kind of go like, well, that's not right. That's not true. How dare they say that to me? But it was true. And I'm grateful that I got that information down the line.
Yeah.
So when I left P&B, I was with Ballet and then I started freelancing. And that really took freelancing, just developing that aspect of my career took all of my time. And I couldn't really focus that much on choreography. So here and there, I'd throw something out there, but I didn't really get a lot of interest until my last year freelancing when I was selected for the National Choreographers Initiative, which is a very competitive application process, and it's very hard to get. They take 4 choreographers each year, and the other choreographers that were selected beside me were Garrett Smith, who is now doing very well internationally. Yeah, and Gabrielle Lamb, who's a Princess Grace Award winner for choreography, and then Philip Neal, who is like a beloved dance star from New York City Ballet. So for me, having no experience, I felt like I was faking my way into that program.
Yeah, that's impressive.
And I pretty much walked in, and I hadn't choreographed in like 2.5, 3 years, and I didn't tell anybody that. But there was something that just inside me was like, if I can get selected for something like this, maybe there is the possibility for me to move forward with that.
Wow.
But yeah, so that I ended up not realizing I had my career-ending injury right before that, and having that as my first experience really pushed the path forward for that.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
So now you're also you're an impressive teacher now. You're teaching at numerous well-known studios around the world, and so now you're also a teacher. Tell us a little bit about that.
You have such nice things to say. Thank you. Yeah. So what happened was when I finally realized that I was done performing, I'd been freelancing out of Philadelphia, and I realized I needed to transition to New York. So I started to realize that if I wanted to transition to New York and be able to afford New York rent and everything like that, that I would have to have a substantial amount of work lined up beforehand. And choreographing, it's not like a regular job where you work like 9 to 5 every day and you go back to the same organization.
Going back to what Peter advised you.
Yeah, exactly. You get picked up for a couple of weeks, or sometimes even just a week, and then you have to go back. So I had to set up work that was flexible, that would allow me to travel, but that also would be able to sustain me. So I really started to push with teaching, and that's really the period that I started to fall in love with teaching, because I realized, so for me, number one was always choreography after I was done performing. And everything that I've pretty much started to do alongside that is, it all feeds into choreography. So for instance, I teach at Broadway Dance Center, and that Steps on Broadway. I'm regular faculty at Broadway Dance Center, so I have regular classes at Steps. I pick up classes, and I also have choreographed for handfuls of workshops.
Yeah, those are 2 really impressive schools to be teaching at. Not just any teacher can walk in and say, "Hey, can I teach for you?"
Yeah, it was like a childhood dream, because I was a competition kid. Like the first taste of dance outside of my home studio, aside from like little workshops in our area, was going to Broadway Dance Center. Wow. So that was like a full circle moment when I got hired there. But yeah, so for teaching in those types of studios, they're open class studios. They're not like a typical tuition-based program where you pay a lump sum amount of money and you get the same teachers and you have a set class schedule and you feel committed to those classes because you paid so much money. Open classes, you pay for one class, you get to choose who you want to take. If you love them, you can take again. If you don't ever have to take from them again. Yeah, so
I teach open classes here in Amsterdam, and I love it. I mean,
yeah,
I've taught for plenty of schools, and I love teaching students that are there for a set curriculum, and that's also rewarding and fun. But no, give me open classes. I love my open class students.
Yeah, it's very different, and you do get some of the tuition-based students that come through at times where they're looking to enhance their training. But it's really fascinating interacting, especially because open class has more adults in it than it typically has kids. You're either getting working professionals, auditioning professionals, people who are sort of in like a gap period between their their pre-professional training and getting to become a professional. And then you get the recreational adults who are there because they absolutely love it.
Yeah. And working with those kinds of people is an absolute joy. It's all hard work too. It's not like you let up and take it easy on them. They don't want that. They want to work hard. They want to learn and to sweat and work, and they love it. So I don't know. It's just a very different dynamic when the people are just there because of their passion, because of the
Yeah.
love of what they do, and just boom, you go for it, and you work so hard, but you also have so much fun at the same time. That's such a rewarding way to work. I love doing it. I'm never going to stop doing it.
Yeah, it's for me, what was really fascinating was coming from a major organization through major organizations like Houston Ballet and Pacific Northwest Ballet. For me, you get used to working with people at a high caliber of training, and also the company is very supported by the school. So you're constantly interacting with the high level students, and sometimes you take class with them when you're on layoff or on summer break, and you see the high level that dancers are training at. So when I left professional, like the stage, the professional stage, I really only wanted to work with pre-professional students of that caliber, because I wanted to work with people who were going to have a career, and then maybe they one day would be on stage and they'd have the opportunity to say, like, I was inspired by this teacher. Like, for me, that was sort of exciting. So the first time I started teaching adults, I really didn't want to. I was freelancing and I was taking class at the Koresh School for Dance in Philadelphia, which is the school for a wonderful contemporary company down in Philly. I say down because I'm North, but over in Philly. And I was picking up like a little bit of teaching. This is like when I really first started teaching here and there. And they were like, the only class we have to offer you is the Intro to Ballet open class. And I was like, hell no. Like, there's no point. They have no future. There's no hope for them. But then I looked at my bank account and I was like, oh, I really have to do this. So yeah, so what I did was I actually took a few open intro classes myself from a few of the other teachers. And what I noticed was a few teachers really taught those students. And then a lot of teachers just gave them class and they let them get away with things. And in that moment, I was like, I thought I was like a more chill person, but I'm learning as I get older that I'm much more type A than I.
It's funny how the things we learn about ourselves only later in life.
Exactly. But yeah, so I realized if I was going to teach adults that I would need to really go into the classroom and teach them and hold them accountable and want them to get better. Like I have a saying, like we have at Broadway Dance Center, we have basic, beginner, advanced, beginner, intermediate, advanced levels. And I always tell my dancers, I don't want you to be a basic dancer forever. Now, if you're comfortable at that level, but my goal is that you actually can see the improvement, even if you're only coming one day a week. At least if your muscles aren't getting constant conditioning, you're at least learning the technique.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
it's great to watch people grow, regardless of where they're growing to. A lot of the people that I teach, they'll never become professional dancers, but they're still growing. You can see that they're learning and getting stronger. And coordination is improving, and there's so much more beyond that as well. But yeah, the point is that people are always growing and learning and experiencing.
Exactly. Yeah. So to bring it back to the choreography thing. So what I slowly started to realize was that especially at Broadway Dance Center, we have professionals coming through who are just staying in shape or warming up. Like, we're right next to Moulin Rouge. Like, constantly we have dancers from Broadway just stepping in our studio and then heading over to their show.
Yeah.
So I'm very inspired to work with the pre-professionals and the professionals, because I hope that maybe one day those dancers could dance for me. Obviously, most of them won't, but I'm essentially like training them to dance the way that I would want them to dance in my work.
Balanchine style.
Balanchine, and then I have this whole new contemporary aspect that's come into my life and all of that. And then also I have, like you, the Vaganova background coming from the Kirov. So it's a very today style, in my opinion. But then, so teaching the adult recreational students, what I feel like I'm doing is I'm creating this full circle in our arts community, and not just me, but obviously all the teachers. But we're creating this full arts circle of the arts, because like I said, those dancers, they aren't going to become professional dancers. They maybe dance when they were younger and then are picking it back up, or their parents didn't let them dance, or they didn't have access or the ability to afford dance training. And then as adults, they have these great jobs and they're able to finally fulfill that dream and that passion that they've always had. And then, so they're coming into class. I start every class with trivia. And it's just about like the basic functioning of the ballet world, or it might be about repertoire, or just anything involving that. And what I'm doing is I'm educating the audience so that they become interested, not only just being able to recognize technique on stage and to know like that's good technique, that's bad technique, this is my preference in style and acting, and this isn't. What I'm also doing is I'm teaching them how companies function so that they, beyond just sit in the audience, that maybe they become advocates and they bring other people into the theater. Maybe they become donors. For some of them, if they're doctors, maybe they become health professionals that can help dancers. And really, we can't survive as an art form if we aren't cultivating the audience. And we can't just expect the audience to want to show up because I made this cool dance that I think is amazing. You should be in the audience. And if you're not there, how dare you? It doesn't work like that. We have to educate our audiences. And this is definitely one of the prime audiences, because not only do they do all those things, they become the advocates that invite their friends that maybe have no interest or even don't really know what ballet is aside from seeing it in the media.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's pretty much my whole teaching philosophy as well. I mean, I've taught at some schools where it's like, you push the kids really hard, like you're training future principals of the Paris Opera Ballet. But, the vast majority that I teach and the style that I like to teach is that I'm training a new generation of ballet fans that are going to support the ecosystem and appreciate it and just have a level of knowledge and appreciate exactly what you were saying. I think that's incredibly important. And also Ballet Rising is a little bit of both. We want to help train future dancers, choreographers, teachers, and stuff like that. But we're also about spreading the joy of just dance and art and freedom of expression in any culture and cross-culture appreciation and things like that.
Yeah, and truly cultures around the world, right? Not just like your local culture.
Yeah, I mean, all cultures, all different dance styles. I mean, I always say that I need to find a better terminology, but I believe ballet for me is a gateway drug to dance and art. And, I don't believe ballet is any type of superior style of dance or anything like that. No, it's just that it's an intro that I think a lot of people could see and experience. And from there, you can start to find new styles of dance and new styles of art that where you find your voice and things like that.
Yeah, it's pretty much like the alphabet of dance.
Yeah. I mean, so many styles of dance come from ballet, so you do get a big appreciation, sort of a broader view of dance itself, but then you can move on to different styles and maybe go into things that aren't even remotely related to ballet, like hip hop or something, But, to each his own, but it's all about that appreciation for dance, art, and freedom of expression. It's important, and we've got to cultivate the future audiences as much as the future dancers themselves. It's equally important, I think. But yeah, so then on top of that, now let's go into another hat, and then we'll get to the last one, and then we're really going to get into it. But you're a director as well. You have a company. How long has that been going on? Tell us about that.
It's that's a new endeavor. So I am officially the artistic director of Movement Headquarters Ballet Company. One day we'll chop off Ballet Company and just call it Movement Headquarters. But when we started, I wanted to just let people know that we were a dance organization. Yeah. So I'll go back to where we were talking about with my transition to New York City. So I had started really focusing on building teaching work so that I could survive in New York. So kind of like during my freelance career, at the end of the last 4 years of my performance career, I kind of had to put choreography on the back burner. I had this great opportunity for like a year and a half to really focus on choreography, where I did the National Choreographers Initiative. I was a finalist for the McCallum Theater Choreography Festival in Palm Desert, which is a really prestigious choreography competition. And I developed a YouTube mini-series. And then right after I did the YouTube mini-series, I started getting little things here and there. I got a commission with Columbia Ballet Collaborative. I got a commission with a company, Uptown Dance Company in Houston. And I got a commission with Cello Point, a small chamber ballet company in New York. So I got all these things, but then right around that time in 2017, we moved in October 2017. I super commuted for 2 years from Philadelphia to New York. Nobody should ever do that. It was crazy.
Yeah, I know.
Rough. But so I ended up again having to put choreography on the back burner, and I created the teaching aspect of my career. And once I finally moved to New York, my husband and I moved to New York, and we established ourselves here, and I was teaching so much. I was actually starting to burn out on teaching because I was pretty much teaching every day of the week. And it's still commuting an hour and a half to Greenwich, Connecticut, like 3 days a week.
And teaching is hard. People don't realize that. As a dancer, you don't realize that teaching is hard. It's a lot. It's not as physically demanding, obviously, as dancing, but mentally it is 10,000 times more draining.
It is. And also having our backgrounds that we have, we can actually show, and also being at the younger age as a teacher, we can show a lot. So there is still a physical aspect to it, but yeah, it's exhausting.
Yeah.
And so what happened was I had all this teaching, and I started getting pulled into the Youth America Grand Prix scene. So I was choreographing contemporary solos for students to compete at Youth America Grand Prix. And so I was choreographing, but it wasn't very, how do I put this? It was fulfilling in a certain sense, technically, in seeing the growth of my students. But when it comes from an artistic sense, it wasn't very fulfilling artistically, because it was more like a formula of like, okay, make sure you show their technique, make sure you show that they can move in a different style, make sure they touch the floor once, make sure that there are a certain number of turns, a leg goes up at least once, and then find a way to make it artistic in less than 2.5 minutes.
Jazz hands.
Yeah. So I was choreographing a lot, but I wasn't fulfilling the artistic side that I was really hoping to do. So I slowly started to pick off a little bit of the teaching from year to year, because we, like the ballet world, we work and function in seasons, kind of like school years. So once I got enough off my plate, I was like, okay, I haven't been putting anything out choreographically, and nobody is interested. And I had been reaching out after National Choreographers Initiative for commissions, and I was getting interest, but the way that the ballet world works is it takes about 2 to 3 years for a company to really, truly be able to commission you, because they have their seasons set up in advance. So there was a point where I went, I don't have anything new to send people, so it's not like I can be like, look at how I'm growing. So if I want to be able to have commissions, and if I want to have opportunities, I'm going to have to create them myself. So I started dabbling with some dancers I'd worked with in Cello Point, Columbia Collaborative, and there were 2 dancers, Ali Block and Shannon Maynor, who really became wonderful advocates for my work, and also just kept on checking in on me and pushing me. And I ran into Shannon at a coffee shop in Sunnyside in Queens, where I live, and she lived in Washington Heights, which is way far away by New York standards. And I was like, what are you
New York. Washington Heights is like Mars.
She was rehearsing for Nutcracker, yeah, in Sunnyside. But so I was like, what are you doing here? And then we were catching up, and she was like, so when are you starting this thing you've been talking about? And I was like, I just don't feel like I'm ready. And she was like, I believe in you. And she's like, and there are others that do, and you just need to know that. And that was like the seed had been planted.
Wow.
Yeah. So as I've learned over the years, watching other companies and watching other people try to do things, a lot of times people think that like you can just build something and then it's there and it functions like other companies that we see.
Yeah, Ballet, like that.
Yeah, like Ballet Pacifica, I remember that when they wanted to start with like a 30-week contract, and that failed. Recently, there was there's a company in South Carolina that wanted to start like that. They had like 20 or 30 dancers, like a big season, but they hadn't ever done one show, and they just expected to function, and it collapsed. All the dancers moved there on contract, it collapsed, and then they were left with no jobs and stuck with leases. And I observing that, I knew that I had to sort of just like test the waters. So the first thing I did was I signed up for a workshop at Mark Morris Dance Center, created 8 minutes of a Pas de Chát spring. Then I signed up for the Steps Performance Lab. I taught a little bit of the piece that I choreographed the National Choreographers Initiative. When I was doing as I was teaching the dancers that I wanted to work with, some of the repertoire that I wanted to be in our premiere. Like, a,
Free rehearsal time.
well, not only that, I planned on using them, and I wanted to see A, could they handle it, and then B, I wouldn't have to reteach it. We could just get it back into where it needed to be by the time. So then after that, I chose to do a showing, and that was the first time that we had come up with the name, and I had hired a few more dancers, and the showing was, again, repertoire that I wanted to do in the launch, but it was like little tidbits. But the real reason I did the showing was because I wanted to see if people would show up.
That's important.
Well, and so many people, they express interest on social media, but that doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to follow through.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to see if that would happen, and I created a very controversial slogan for it. It was our Bring Ballet Back campaign, which, whatever, controversy is not that bad of a thing. But a few people were upset with it because they thought that what I was saying was that ballet was dying and that we needed to revive it. And I've never felt that way.
Well, that's not an uncommon position that a lot of people have. I've spoken to several of these video casts that I've done. People have talked about that, and I think for a while it really kind of was on the slide. Only in the past few years have we really started to see a massive resurgence of ballet in regular mainstream media. I mean, for quite a few years you didn't see much at all. After Baryshnikov and Nureyev sort of died out, it was just kind of on the surface, but kind of behind the scenes. It's only been since Misty and a few other people have really brought it back into mainstream. So I don't think it's far off. I don't think that's a far out there observation.
Yeah, and I've learned that when you say something, and if it does touch a nerve with some people in a bad way and some people in a good way, then it's probably true.
Yeah. If it's polarizing, it's definitely going to get some attention.
Yeah, but the interesting thing is, with what you just said, and also in the times that we're in order for ballet to survive and to thrive and to grow, media had to step in. And for a while, the media wasn't really interested in what the dance community was doing. And then really the revival of certain aspects of ballet is thanks to the media. And then here we are in a time when the media is everything. So it'll be really interesting to see how that evolves.
Yeah.
But not to get too far into that yet. So the Bring Ballet Back campaign, it was really just to say, ballet companies are thriving across the country, small ballet companies. There are small new startup companies that have been around for a shorter period of time, and they're really like creating new work and interesting work. But in New York City, the youngest ballet company, I believe, is Complexions, and they just celebrated their 25th anniversary.
Wow. Is that true? Wow. That's amazing.
But Cedar Lake was around, but they folded. But no other company has really had any substantial hold and been creating new work and been developing excitement in New York City in 25 years.
Wow.
Except for Complexions, Cedar Lake, which is no longer.
Wow, that's amazing. I would never have imagined that. That's kind of one of those little hidden facts that you're kind of like, really?
And also one thing that's been happening is when new work is being presented by ballet companies in the city, either they bring in those companies that are doing well outside of the city, or they use dancers that are already dancing with New York City Ballet, American Ballet Theater, Complexions, Dance Theater of Harlem, and those dancers are getting opportunities when we have a massive freelance scene. So my goal with building Movement Headquarters was to try to create a company from the start, not feeling like we had to have 30 dancers and a 40-week season, but to create the company from the start using only freelance artists. Obviously, some of them do have credentials from really great companies, but they are not on full contracts. So the goal is to create a company that can be sustainable, that can grow to at least a medium-sized company, that I'm hoping 30 dancers in 10 to 12 years. And then also in our earliest stage to support the local freelance community and make sure that we're giving these great dancers opportunities. So there's multiple reasons in the end. Initially, it was just I wanted to choreograph and I wanted to give myself these commission opportunities, but then it turned into something that was much more community-based and much more trying to support the community, because if they support me by being my dancers to let me create work and to share my voice, I also get to support them by making sure that I'm not filling an area of work that could be filled with other dancers that are on 40-week contracts already dancing fantastic works by wonderful choreographers. So that was really how Movement Headquarters came about.
Cool, man.
But it's crazy.
Yeah. And so now for one more hat, and this is the hat that I really want to get to. You're a writer, a dance writer, and you've written quite a few articles for very well-known publications. How did that begin? Because I know you've done a lot of writing. I've read your blog.
Yeah.
And you've always been an active person blogging and writing.
Yeah.
Yeah, tell us about that a little bit, and then let's segue into this article that I want to get to.
Yeah, I don't know if you actually remember how it began, my writing career, if you want to call it at the beginning of my writing career. Do you remember MySpace used to have blogging?
Oh, yes, yeah.
And I would blog frivolous things on MySpace, sometimes about work, sometimes about the homeless problem in Seattle. I remember at one point Ariana Lalone pulling me aside and being like, "You should not be writing on MySpace." And the funny thing,
Former principal dancer of Ballet. Love her to pieces, absolute.
But for the people that are watching this, former principal of Pacific Northwest Ballet, she pulls me aside and she's like, "You should not be writing this," because I think I wrote something about like having a bad day at work. And that was like the beginning of my brand. My brand has always been candor. Like I'm not going to cut anybody down. I'm not going to call people out in real time. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to be honest about my life experience. So my brand is candor as a writer. But so I started doing that. And when Ariana, when she questioned that, it's funny because instead of being like, "Oh my God, I can't believe she said that to me," I was like, "So she read it."
And she did. And a lot of people did. I think I remember this now. I don't think I ever did, but I heard about it from about 10 people.
I mean, the great thing about that was it was like a frivolous platform. I think I wrote like 400 posts. There was one really bad post that I wrote that I regret, but I'm glad that I had it in that format because it's just something that it was like I was young and it will not come back to like bite me in the ass at any point because it was like young love. And I deleted it, and but I remember a handful of people reading it and being like, "Oh my God, I can't believe I did that." But anyway, so that was a good lesson early on to know how and when to write things.
Yeah, exactly.
So I did about 400 posts on MySpace that were just like little snippets, and then after that, I didn't really write very much for after I left PNB and MySpace became kind of defunct, and then. I had a really crazy transition from Ballet X to freelancing, and this, like I said, this is really where like my brand of candor really started to come about. I was fired from Ballet X for being injured. It's a long, complicated story I'm not going to get into. I've written about it if people want to look for it. But I was fired from them, and we had just moved from Seattle, 3,000 miles away, for this job. My husband left his job in Seattle, and it was really a crisis when it happened. And I ended up he was starting his own business and making very little income because it was like 2 months old. And I had lost all my income when I got fired. So I started freelancing immediately. I was still injured. Like I was still dancing injured, but I had no choice. So I remember the first day that I was staying with my host family, I was rehearsing with Festival Ballet of Providence. And I was sitting with the host family and I was like, I need to come up with a plan and I need to do it now. I don't have time. So I was like, what am I good at? Okay, I'm a good dancer. And when I was writing back in Seattle, people were interested. It wasn't a lot, but it was like I'd get 100 views per post. So I was like, maybe I need to find a way to promote myself by writing. So I developed Life of a Freelance Dancer. And over my 4-year freelance career, and then a little bit after that, I pretty much wrote about my experiences as a freelancer. I wrote tutorials about different aspects of freelancing and independent contracting. And it actually became really popular. It was like a niche popular, but it became popular, and it really gave me a great ability to market myself as a freelancer. I didn't audition for one job the entire 4 years that I freelanced. It was a combination of sending my reel which showed the companies hiring me that I was a good dancer, and then also sending my blog, which showed them that I was an intelligent and thoughtful human being. So that was very beneficial. But beyond that, I didn't realize at the time I was cultivating professional writing skills. Yeah. So at a certain point, like I've always been aggressive. So I would reach out to Dance Magazine and be like, I would love to write for you. I don't know how this works. I didn't go to college.
No, just go for it. I mean, I got a photography gig, I think, with Point Magazine. They just reached out and said, hey, I do photography. Yeah. A year later, they were like, hey, here's your chance. I was like, okay, cool.
Yeah, and I mean, that's what happened with the tech world. Like, there a lot of people who are in tech, they don't have college degrees, but what they did was they learned a base amount, and then they had like on-site learning after that. And they get paid way more than a lot of people who have college degrees. So, but yeah, so what ended up happening was I had reached out to them around the time that I was transitioning to New York about my super commuting. And it's something that not many people do or have done. And it was an interesting story. And they had been following my blogs because they had featured it at one point in one of their articles. And it was fascinating because I think I gave them 3 pitches and they chose that one. And it was me getting to write about me. And I was like, I'm going to get to write about myself in this major publication. Fascinating.
I can't. When I wrote a bio on myself once. It was just the most excruciating thing I've ever done.
As you can probably, as people, I mean, you know me, but as people watching this, I can talk. So pretty much it's like I get to talk without an audience. I just get to talk without having to like have a response.
Which is
my thought process in real time. But yeah, so that began, and every once in a while I check in with them, and then over the past like year, actually probably 1.5 years, I'd reached out to them, and I told them I wasn't going to be available to write anything for a few weeks because I was traveling Southeast Asia, and I was taking that time off. And of course, like everything in my life, they were like, actually, do you want to write a profile on Hong Kong Ballet? And that's really the time that I'd started to write for them more frequently. I don't work for them as an employee. I'm an independent contractor again. But so I went to Hong Kong and I got to hang out with Septime Weber and Hong Kong Ballet for a few days. Septime and I, we knew each other, we were acquainted. But it was the best introduction to it was our second honeymoon. And it was the best introduction to that trip. And since then I've been writing more frequently for them.
Nice. Great. Yeah. I've read a couple of things you wrote, but yeah, I was reading this fantastic article a couple of weeks ago called "What are the implications of offering free dance online?" And I was just reading the whole article because I've been, as we were talking earlier, Ballet Rising is really about a cultural shift in not just the centers of ballet, the major capitals of ballet, but also about ballet around the world and how global cultures are already influencing and how they'll influence it in the future and how we can cultivate all this stuff. It's a cultural thing. But I've been thinking for a couple of years now that we also need simultaneously a digital revolution because we have, as an art form, we have just never really cultivated audiences very well. The audiences that come to the ballet are diehard ballet fans who just love ballet. They're sort of those people that just sort of get it.
Yeah.
But we've never really gone out and used different means of sort of cultivating new audiences and introducing more people to audiences. And so, yeah, this is one of the things I've been researching and thinking about a lot the past couple of years. And suddenly this COVID-19 has been thrust upon us. Yeah. And now for the first time in history, ballet is free. Classes, rehearsals, performances, and there's going to be a whole new genre of ballet, which is made for film dance performances and things like that. And so we're just on the cusp of this massive revolution in our art form. And your article really touched a lot of points that I've been thinking about for a long time as well. So I really wanted to reach out to you and talk to you about it. And just a little backstory. When I reached out to you, you had mentioned that you had obviously done a tremendous amount of research on this, and that obviously the article can only be so long,
Yeah.
and that
There
you,
were 6 people involved. It was
yeah.
immense.
So
Yeah.
I'm just really curious. Tell us about this article. Tell us about the research you did. You know, what are the main points that you really felt are really important, or just, yeah, let's sort of, yeah, how can we sort of just break into this, because I want to talk about it. I think it's fascinating.
The the I guess the best way to start is, I mean, I live in New York City, and I live in Queens. I live like two miles, maybe less, away from Elmhurst Hospital, which was the very first hospital on national news as the crisis was happening. So everything happened to us in very real time here in New York. A lot of people were watching us on the news, but to experience that in real life was traumatizing, like completely and utterly traumatizing.
Yeah.
So as things started to shut down across the country, not everybody was experiencing the shutdown the way that we were. We were just coping with feeling like people, like not feeling, with the reality that people around us were getting sick. So for me, like the experience of watching the world shut down, like the economy shut down and the country shut down, it was very different. And so what was happening was a lot of people immediately started putting out dance content. And for me, I couldn't think of any, like, why would people just immediately be putting out dance content without thinking about it? I actually wrote another article about dancer resilience and how, like, essentially, if you fall on stage, you have to react right away and get back up, even if you like sprain something. And a lot of people, they sprain it, they finish the performance, and they can't dance for 6 months.
People realize later that they were actually seriously injured because you got so much
Exactly.
adrenaline
Yeah.
pumping through you.
And I saw the same thing happening in a different way. It was almost like a digital sprain that was happening. And for me, it was more like, why are people doing this when people are getting sick? And I know I've stopped counting how many people I know who are getting sick. So what I was watching was that happening without much thought, and it upset me. I was very angry for the first few weeks of the whole shutdown. And then at the same time, I have my company. We just launched in February. Like we were the lucky ones, and I had just gotten footage of our performance, and I only have 4 pieces recorded from the company. So I was like watching all these companies putting out this free content, and I was like, if I put out free content, I'm pretty much giving away everything I have. And then I was also, as a teacher, like, I didn't know at the time that I would qualify for unemployment. My husband owns his own business. We didn't know that they were going to do the pandemic unemployment. And the stock market crashed 3 times in 1 week. Like, they had only halted the stock market in the US once. And then it happened 3 times the week that we were shutting down. And I was sitting here, I was like, I have money saved in my savings for my taxes, which we were doing at that time. We were actually like getting our tax numbers the week after we shut down. And I was like, I need to make money because this could be the next Great Depression.
Yeah.
So I was watching all of these teachers starting to put out content for free, live streams. And I was like, why would I give away things for free when I don't know if I'm going to be able to put food on the table next month? Yeah. And the thing I also recognize is a lot of these were not career teachers. They were dancers that were putting out the content. So there were so many different aspects of like anger and confusion and unsurety. We hear sirens all the time. You can probably hear in the background, but you're lucky. It had been every 30 seconds for days and days and days. I just want to be very real about what it's been like living in New York City. Back to what I was talking about. So I was frustrated because I was seeing so many people that were not career educators, and I was seeing these companies that were like New York City Ballet doing a free digital season, which I'm grateful for because I'm watching the content. At the same time, I was like, they have the money to survive this. Yes, it's going to affect them negatively, probably very badly, but I was like, they're giving away content when there are other people that need to be able to survive off of this. Like the dancers that are giving free classes that are still getting pay for the rest of their season.
Yeah, I've felt that a lot as well. I felt that at the beginning as well, because I get paid by the hour, and I'm a teacher. Yeah. That's what I do for a living. That's how I pay my rent. That's how I buy my food. And yeah, here's everybody giving it away for free. So I was a bit like, okay, we're gonna have to find something else to do.
Well, the big challenge for me especially was I appreciated and I wanted to support them. But the thing is, as teachers, people have access to us regularly as teachers. But when you see a star or a professional dancer, whether it be somebody like in New York City Ballet or somebody that you see in a very small company, like say, what would be a smaller company like St. Louis Ballet, even those audience members that are going to see those company dancers, they fall in love with certain dancers, and to have the opportunity to take class with them, it's very exciting.
Yeah.
So while maybe they haven't cultivated their teaching skills as a dancer, they're keeping themselves in shape, and they're giving back to the audience, but they're giving back at a time when people need. And it's hard to like look, when is it appropriate to give back, and when is it appropriate to think about your needs. And for a lot, I felt like they weren't thinking about other people's needs. They were just thinking about, honestly, for the dancers, I think a lot of them were like, I need to keep myself accountable to stay in shape.
I think there's like 500 different points of view on that.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. But so that's really what drove me to reach out to my editor and pitch the article that I did. And I wanted to make sure though that I wasn't just focusing on teachers, because for me, like money, like I've said, money making for me is teaching. So that was one of my biggest fears. But then also I have this new aspect of my career with being a director. And we're lucky with Movement Headquarters that we can really just pause. We don't have any overhead being a brand new company that uses pickup artists. So I wanted to learn more for myself. And it's sort of like when I was blogging, I love when I can learn something for myself, because then I'm passionate about it, and then be able to write about it and share it. And that's really what drove the article. So I interviewed a handful of artistic directors, small and large companies. I interviewed a manager of an agency, Margaret Selby, and then I also interviewed Tyler Peck, who has been doing free live streams since she went home.
Hers are some of the more popular ones on Instagram, I think, right?
Yeah.
I highlighted a section from the article. I think she said she had some insane amount of views.
Yes.
Between 1,000 and 15,000 dancers have taken my class daily.
Yeah. So the way that she has it set up, like most people who do live streams, you do the live stream, then you can leave it up for 24 hours.
Yeah.
So I think the most at any point, it was like 8 to 10,000 live, and then it went to 15,000 by the end of the 24 hours.
I think of those kinds of numbers, and this is just what got me started on the whole idea long before COVID-19. Just the sheer numbers of people. When you can have 15,000 people take your class in a single day, how many classes would you have to teach in a regular studio to do that?
Yeah, it's crazy.
I mean, that's unbelievable.
And that's the amazing part of it. There's like with everything, the amazing part of it is that the challenging part of it is, how do you convey physical corrections?
There's definitely limitations, and same with performing. We'll get to that as well, because there was some of the comments from some of the people you interviewed had said, we can't go away from live performance, and there's some major drawbacks to it as well.
Mm-hmm. One thing that I think is valuable to share with the numbers thing, because Peter Boll from Pacific Northwest Ballet, artistic director, we've mentioned him already before. He gave numbers. He did a free open class at the very beginning of the shutdown, and he gave another like massive sum of people that went into the classes. The thing that I think is important to note when we're looking at the different numbers is that this was all happening when everybody was thrown into their homes with fear and anxiety, and we tend to turn to, as artists, to dance when we have those things as our outlet. And then also like not having a set schedule of like what we're going to do in our home. There were those aspects to it, but beyond all of that, things have changed a lot since then, because it took a while for studios that had tuition from students to put in place systems so they could bring their students back, rein them back into their studios, and continue to keep that tuition. Yeah. And also like with the open classes, Peter said that initially the free one, there were tons of people, but since they started charging for it, it's pretty much back to like normal open class levels. Yeah. And same for like Tyler. I haven't talked to Tyler since I interviewed her, but I'm assuming that at the beginning it was like this big, like, oh, somebody that I love watching on stage is giving a class. I would love to take class with her.
Yeah.
And now a lot of those, especially those kids, have probably gone back to their studio Zoom classes now. And also those adults, some of them have probably like fallen out of their exercise pattern, or they have to go back to working remotely and things like that.
Yeah, I
So
think the dance studio where I'm teaching here in Amsterdam, we had the same, you know, because the first week I was teaching classes on Zoom, I had like 200 people in my classroom. And now I think we're back down to about exactly like everybody else, same number as a normal situation where I have like 15, 12 people in the studio.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the whole thing, it reached a peak and then it tapers off, but still quite fascinating to see where we can go from there. I mean, this is still such an untapped, unknown area. And my biggest thing is, and this is what we'll get to, is how companies are going to monetize this in the future. How are we going to capitalize on this? Is this going to be the new norm? Well, yeah, we'll see. But there's definitely something there. I think the genie is out of the bottle.
Yeah, it's already starting to happen. I'm a ballet nerd. Ballet. We know that. But I keep an eye on a lot of different people that have crossed through my career path, and also freelancing around the country. I've gotten to interact with so many different communities, which has been a very valuable asset to me. But I just recently read Olivier Wapers, who we both dance with at PNB as well, who runs, he's the artistic director of Wim Wim in Seattle. They just announced the digital season, and there is a monetized aspect to it. So I don't want to give any information on it yet because I haven't read enough on it, but you should definitely check it out. And anybody that's watching this should check that out.
Nice. Yeah, so you had said that you'd done a lot of research. So if anybody's interested, let me just pop that up one more time. The article is, oh gosh, I've got so many tabs open, it's insane.
Tabs.
Okay, now I can't find it. Oh, there it is. It's in Dance Magazine from May 6th. What are the implications of offering free dance online? I'll put a link below the video for everyone who's interested in reading it, because I think it's a great article, and I think it'll be quite relevant for some time because, yeah, we're nowhere near out of this situation. But so, yeah, what do you think the gist of the article was? Like, what if you could sum up sort of like, what was your feeling you were left with at the end of the article as to where we're going from here on out?
Yeah, at the beginning of my preparation for the article is very much team, nothing should be free. And by the end of the article, I understood more the reasoning behind why certain things were free and the challenges of actually monetizing different content. So, I mean, the thing is, ballet companies, especially in the United States, it's different in Europe and across the world, but in the United States, we're set up in our 501c3 nonprofit system where you have to have that to apply for grants, but a majority of our funding in the United States really comes from private donations, and those private donations are given because they get a tax deductible component to giving that money. So yeah, with the setup that we are in as nonprofits, it makes it very challenging. Honestly, like at times now that I'm like starting to get into that area, I feel like we're set up to be beggars. So for the dance world, the natural thing to do was to give content away for free and beg. We really need your help right now, but here, something for free. Like it was just very challenging for me to understand. But with ballet companies, especially, there are multiple components that go into putting on a performance. You have the dancers, you have the music, and sometimes that's live, sometimes it's not, but still it can be copyrighted if it's even live music. You have set designs, you have costume designs, you have videography. There are many different aspects that go into it, and the one thing that really gave me a place to listen was recognizing that in order for these companies to put content online, if they monetize it, they're going to have to give some of that money to everybody. Then all of a sudden they're probably paying to put the content online or barely making any income
Yeah.
versus actually.
There's a really interesting quote. Yeah, it's from Celia Fushile.
Yeah.
All parties involved, choreographers, designers, union crew, theaters, and music publishers have worked with us to make these offerings possible. If we were benefiting financially from streaming, some of those groups might require compensation, and this would make streaming costs prohibitive and unlikely and likely impossible.
And she wasn't the only one to say that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's quite amazing how much of the value that's actually extracted out of the content that's created by these organizations, and the same goes for YouTubers and bloggers, and how much of the value is sucked up by so many other people other than the creators themselves. It's a really shocking dynamic that I don't think most people around the world are even aware of, except for the YouTubers, the bloggers, and now the arts organizations, who are desperately trying to monetize somehow the content that they put out on the internet.
Yeah, I thought one really interesting aspect of the article that I didn't realize when I was setting it up, but that I obviously connected all the dots in the end. So Peter Bull from PNB gave a lot of information, and then Margaret Selby gave a lot of information, and then Celia Fushile. So Celia Fushile is the artistic director of Smuin Ballet, which is a smaller contemporary ballet company in the San Francisco Bay Area. So I didn't really connect all that. I didn't realize that at the beginning that Margaret Selby is actually the manager for Pacific Northwest Ballet when it comes to touring.
Oh, wow.
And it was really interesting because, so Smuin Ballet was doing these hump day ballets every Wednesday, giving a free ballet online for people to watch. But in order to watch the ballet, you had to sign up for their newsletter, and that's how they sent you the link. So to pretty much tied you into at least like committing to communication. So that was interesting. Then the way that PNB worked was they were the first ones to actually find a way to retain lost revenue. They had started imposing like limits on audience members being, numbers of people convening together in Seattle. So they couldn't do their performance. So what they did was they live streamed their dress rehearsal, but it was only for ticket buyers and subscribers. Yeah. And since then, PNB has done a few free performances online, but a majority of the content they've done, it's been for people that already had put money in. So they weren't actually asking for people to give them money. They were asking to retain the money that had already been given. Okay. But then it's interesting because that's how PNB chose to go about it. But then Margaret, who is responsible for PNB promotion to get them to go travel around the world, I honestly probably sided the most with what Margaret had to say when it came to releasing content. She was saying that you shouldn't be giving full content out because it's just giving away your product. She said really what you should be doing is you should be creating new content that is focused on inspiring people to see the content that you actually want them to see. But I think the challenge of that is that takes a lot of preparation. Yeah. And that's really what it came down to with the whole shutdown. And what you were saying earlier with the digital revolution in dance. It's that the shutdown is the catalyst for that. But the reason that we haven't focused on it is because of what I was saying about being beggars. We, as dance companies, as I'm learning especially, we live on a bare bones budget. Even financially, the way that the finances work, it affects dance's rehearsal schedules to the point that a lot of times you on stage under rehearse because you have to be laid off a certain amount of weeks because the company can't afford to keep you on contract the entire time, at least in the United States.
And it's more expensive to get stage rehearsal time as well. Often you have to pay the tax and all that stuff. So really, then you hardly ever even get any stage time, and that's all budget, all of it.
Yeah, I mean that's we can do a whole nother 5-hour video on that. But the thing is, everybody is operating on these bare bone budgets, which it's interesting because we knew that if things shut down and we lost revenue, that like anything, not even like a week could put some companies out. not like months. But the thing that I think is most fascinating, especially looking at the US government, that's happening everywhere. I thought that was just the arts world works on these budgets, these slim budgets, but everybody's working at this capacity that if something goes wrong, like they tell us to have like 6 months of like emergency funds to pay your rent. Nobody's doing that.
Who does that? Not even big companies, airline companies.
So when it comes to digital content, we needed something like this to happen in order to not have the want to do it, but have the need to do it. Mm-hmm. And now that we have the need to do it, I think that it's going to finally, and also we have extra time because it's not like we can go out of our homes, or you shouldn't be. But we have the need and we have the time, and hopefully this is going to allow us to set up that framework to have almost like, when you watch something on Netflix, say you watch this really great movie or this really great documentary, and you watch it through and you're like, I really want to know more about this thing. And then you can go and there are the extras. Yeah. Like, I think that what Margaret was saying, Margaret Selby, I think that what she was saying was really what we need to do is we need to create that and have that. And one thing I really appreciate that she said is it's okay for audiences to miss dance.
Yeah, I read that section as well. What is it? The absence makes the heart grow fonder. And I think she's absolutely right. Moving forward from coming pretty soon, I think that's the way we should go. My feeling all along from the beginning has been, wow, how many millions of people around the world are now finally getting access to the top opera houses, I've mentioned this, I think, in every interview I've done, and because for me it's quite shocking. I'm working with ballet teachers in places like Africa and India and South America, who some of them have never taken a ballet class before in their life. Their only exposure to ballet has only ever been online through YouTube and things like that. Yeah. The amount of material that's out there, whether it be classes prior to COVID-19 or ballets online, was minuscule. And so these people were clinging to threads. Now it's just like the plethora of content that's out there is going to breed a whole new revolution of people that are just like, wow, seeing it for the first time, or seeing it for the first time with fresh eyes, just going, wow, because me, I'm a big sports fan. I mean, I've got my Mexico jersey on right now. I mean, I've been able since I can remember to get on my mobile phone or go to a local bar if I want to watch FC Barcelona or the Seattle Seahawks, get on the TV or get on my mobile phone. When in history has somebody in a rural African country been able to get on their mobile phone and watch the Metropolitan Opera or the Paris Opera Ballet or New York City, whatever? This is unprecedented for us. So for the time being, I just couldn't be more excited that everyone's giving away all this free content. It's just spectacular, but it only goes so far. And the arts organizations are hurting financially. And so I think that we really have to look at this as a new opportunity to reach new audiences, but also not just to reach them and expose them, but also to support the company, new revenue streams.
Yeah, it's I think it's a kind of a strange irony because the dance world, especially the ballet world, there's always been like a sense of elitism, and I feel like the last 10 years there's been sort of this attempt to try to break down some of that elitism, because I think it was nice for, not nice, but people liked that elitism for a while, and then they realized that they were going to suffocate the art form by keeping it like in that little glass box.
Yeah.
But so the thing with accessibility is there's sort of like there's a big conversation about how ballet is generally inaccessible to people that can't afford it, and that's not just from a viewership point of view; it's also from a training point of view.
Oh yeah, I mean every
so yeah, there's this like sense that like we're trying to make it more accessible, but there's also the fear of having it be more accessible, because once a live performance is a live performance, it only happens once. And one thing that I say constantly, that you have to be educated about this by somebody in order to understand it. A lot of people that aren't educated on a certain level in the arts, they think of seeing like Swan Lake, for instance. they see it like going to maybe the Louvre and seeing the Mona Lisa. She's at the Louvre, right?
Yeah.
I still need to make it France. But you see the Mona Lisa, and chances are you're not necessarily, most people aren't going to feel the need to go back constantly to see the Mona Lisa over and over. You're like, okay, I saw it, cool.
Right in the crowd.
Yeah, some people will. They'll be like, oh, but what people don't realize is that when it comes to seeing a performance, it's not about, I hate saying this, it's not about the choreography, because the choreography is generally going to remain the same. What it is it's about the interpretation. Yeah. And the interpretation from different people. That's why I constantly say, like in our trivia in the beginning of my classes, if we're talking about something, I'll be like, you go back to see Swan Lake, not necessarily, maybe you see one person, you love their interpretation, you go back because you love the interpretation. Those are the people that go back to see the Mona Lisa again. But it's the idea that you, maybe, I'm blanking right now, whoever painted the Mona Lisa, Renoir? Who?
Da Vinci.
Thank you. I am awful.
We'll edit that part out.
Thank you. I'm going to leave it out of here. But so people, they'll fall in love with Da Vinci's work, and they'll go to see different interpretations of his work all around the world at different places. And really, that's what if we're going to be offering these live performances that we need to educate audiences about, we need to let them know that, yes, you saw this one interpretation, and I know that you're going to see the choreography as looking like the same painting, but in reality, it's a different painter painting the same painting. And you're gonna, that's why you go back to see a performance. If you see Swan Lake on TV, you need to go back to see it live, and then you need to see it in a couple of years to see somebody's growth, or to see somebody else to see if you like their interpretation more. And that's really what's special about the art form.
Yeah, well, I think that dance and theater has a whole nother dimension. And I don't want to compare art forms to say one is better than the other. Yeah, everything is different. But dance and theater have a whole nother dimension that things like painting and sculptures don't. You know, they're moments in time. And I've made this comment to a lot of people, you know, the Mona Lisa is only in one place at one time. You know, you have to go to Paris to see it, or maybe catch it on tour once in every 500 years. Yeah. But In the Middle Summit Elevated can be performed by 20 different companies all simultaneously. Mm-hmm. And you can watch each interpretation of each dancer in each company. And so it's the same piece of choreography, it's the same piece of artwork, but like exactly what you're saying, the interpretations are different. And it's not a static thing that you look at, it's a moment in time, it's an experience and a feeling that you experience while experiencing this art form. So I think for me, that's a whole nother dimension to theater and ballet that something that I think, visual art just doesn't have. You know, there's other aspects of visual art that are stronger, but
I think it's important with what we're talking about, just that I find sometimes that we offer education as an add-on to dance performances, but we don't use it necessarily as a part of dance performances. Almost before every opening night, you almost always have a front curtain speech. It may be helpful at the beginning. Like I've appreciated how New York City Ballet has a little snippet at the beginning of the digital season of somebody sharing some information. These are things that we should be talking about if we're going to offer digital content, so that people understand. I think that adds value, and it's the idea. You shouldn't be putting something for public consumption on a computer screen or a TV screen without having some type of explanation. It doesn't have to be like a synopsis of the plot, but some type of something that you should be inviting the audience to get from it. Because I find the reason that audiences don't return to dance is because they feel dumb. Nobody likes to feel dumb. If you don't understand pantomime, you're pretty much just, it's like being deaf and nobody's speaking sign language. Yeah. It's the same thing for other things. Like, for instance, I use this often. If you listen to a song, there are like verse A, or sorry, there's like verse 1, then there's like chorus A, verse 2, chorus B. There's like a typical structure for songs. And that's why people go back to music and listen to it over and over and over and over and over again. Because even if you never get the lyrics of the verse, you get the catchy chorus and you feel like you're part of it and you understand it. And what a lot of people don't realize in a dance performance is that a lot of dance content is built off of themes. And while it may not follow that exact same pathway as music does, we are dancing to music, so you kind of have no choice at times to come back to that. And any good choreographer will be able to show you that. And while it's different than hearing it and being able to sing it, because that's something that people naturally do, you just have to show it to people and say, just look for a theme and see it come back a couple of times. And that way they're actually engaging in the performance versus just like looking at something they don't understand.
Yeah, people going to the ballet and saying, oh, I saw the ballet once, but not really understanding or comprehending it. And then, like you said, feeling dumb. I try to get people, when I talk to people who aren't familiar with classical ballet or just dance in general, I try to tell them, be critical. There's this feeling like, if I go to the ballet, I have to appreciate it. Otherwise, I'm not educated. I'm not savvy. I'm not something like that. And it's like, no, go and trust your own instincts. Go and watch it and see what you feel, and don't be afraid to say, no, I didn't like that. But then don't let that be an excuse to say. Yeah. Don't let that be an excuse to say, I don't want to go back and see more. Say, I don't like that, but maybe I'll like another one. Because they're all different and things like that. And maybe dance isn't for everybody, but there's a lot of it for a lot of different people. And people just don't have the opportunity to actually go and experience it because of their first experience saying, okay, this is why I'm so against people going to see the Nutcracker as their first experience at the ballet. I think that's the worst thing in the world. Yeah. It's probably like 99%. It's my first experience with ballet.
It's essentially like, and I mean, I don't know anything about sports, so you can correct me, and I don't want to offend anybody, but it's essentially like saying that the Harlem Globetrotters is like competitive basketball.
Yeah. It's a show. It's not the NBA. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I want people to go and trust their own instincts. But really, when you trust your own instincts, I think you go into it saying, okay, let's see it. I think that sort of opens your mind a little bit when you go in thinking, I have to appreciate this. Otherwise, I'm an uncultured moron. Then you kind of go like, okay, I saw it. I feel like if you just sort of trust yourself and go into it and say, okay, I wasn't crazy about that, but maybe I'll like a different one.
And people like having a choice.
Yeah.
And if you get to make your own choices, then
yeah, I think that's a way better way of looking at it. But we'll have to see what we can do about that moving forward. So I would highly encourage everybody to go and read this article. It's a great article. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. But I wanted to get with you and talk to you a little bit more about some of the things that aren't in the article, because you had said you'd done a lot of research and there was some really fascinating things that you weren't able to put in there. What are some of the other things that you kind of felt like that would be really interesting to talk about that weren't in the article?
I think that really it was just that there were so many different perspectives. And that the general feel of it was just that people are figuring things out. And I think that during this time, at first everybody was really forgiving and they were really open to what was happening and open to change and open to looking at things differently. And as time as this is becoming more normal, people are starting to become more divisive and starting to have stronger opinions on things. Like we were saying, the real conversation was that this is changing dramatically the landscape of the dance world, and that everybody's just testing things out and they're looking at the data. And that's the great thing about digital stuff. You have access to data unlike you do otherwise. Like, yeah, you can look at who's, like, for instance, for my company, we hired a ticket sales company and we were able to collect data, but that doesn't mean that everybody put their address and everybody put their phone number and their email into the system. there's just a lot of talk about being able to use data that they can collect through all their websites to be able to do that. There was a lot of conversation that was coming in that I couldn't use because I was already pretty much done with the article about virtual galas and things like that. People really, the big conversation was talking about how to, like we were saying earlier, how to monetize it, but also how to make sure that the dance companies retain the revenue. One thing that was fascinating to me as a dancer was to find out that the orchestra only rehearsed together like once or twice. And then we would have dress rehearsal once, and then we would perform with them the rest. And they got paid way better than we did. And we were rehearsing every single day, 8 hours a day for weeks and weeks and weeks. So there was a lot of information about people needing to be paid. And how, if you are going to monetize things, how do you make it a value and an asset to the company beyond just trying to engage with audiences? And that was another large aspect of it, engaging with audiences. A lot of people were, their first fear was losing their audience's interest. I didn't really talk about that a lot. And that was really what people were reacting to. Like I said, everybody came home and they just started doing things. And I came home and I was like, okay, I know I need to make money. I started doing YouTube videos that are unlisted that people can use, and they're just home bars in small spaces. That was the only thing that I reacted to. But otherwise I sort of sat back and watched everybody. But everybody, they engaged with reaction. And I was surprised that nobody really had a sense of regret for that. It was unashamed. Nobody had necessarily the cognizance to be like, yeah, in retrospect, I wish that we would have waited a little bit longer to sort of see how things were panning out and then move forward. Really, it was everybody chose to react and then to deal with the implications of how that went and then learn from that experience. And like I said, I think that's a very dancerly thing. We're taught, like, you fall, you get up, and then you figure it out as you're going. You forget the choreography, you improvise until you get back onto the choreography. We are very much real-time problem solvers. But what I've learned we all have experiences in our lives where things go wrong and you look back and you're like, gosh, I wish I didn't react. I've learned, like, for me, for instance, if I'm really mad about something, I usually write an email to talk to that person or that organization, and then I leave it in my draft box and I go to sleep. And I wake up the next morning and then I make the choice to send it or not.
Yeah, smart.
Right.
Some people just say it and you go, ooh.
Yeah, and the dance world unashamedly did not do that. They just reacted. And I think that what people were recognizing was in the interactions was that we don't yet understand what the response to that is, and what the benefits and what the challenges and the negatives are to that. It was really like, it left a lot more to be considered, but it informed why people were doing, and people and organizations were doing what they were doing.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, because I was very much one of those people that reacted very quickly. I had the idea of doing exactly what I'm doing right now a long time ago, and I had every intention of starting to do these video casts. But of course, COVID-19 happened, and so I was like, okay, let's change things up a little bit. This is obviously something major. But yeah, I like I said earlier, I had already been thinking about this sort of digital revolution prior to it. And so I'm actually applying for a grant from a fund called the Grant for the Web fairly soon here. I think applications are due June 12th. So anybody who's interested, grantfortheweb.com. And it's all about creating a free and open and more equitable internet for content creators. And so it's a company called Coil, based out of San Francisco, who is developing on a piece of technology called the Interledger Protocol. And what it basically does is, as we were mentioning earlier, a lot of the value that is generated as a result of the content that YouTubers, bloggers, photographers, writers, whatever, whoever, all this content that they generate, most of the revenue gets sucked up by the payment providers and the platforms and all of that stuff. And this is what makes it really difficult for a ballet company or any company to monetize the content, like we were saying earlier. You know, you have to pay the orchestra, you have to pay the technicians, you have to pay all these people. And so when the ballet company itself is getting only pennies from the generation of the content, yeah, that's not equitable. And this has been a big problem in technology for many years now.
It's
Ultimately, it's going into YouTube and to the platforms.
yeah,
And
it's something that I constantly compare the ballet world to. And this is the challenge, because there's so many different entities that go into putting together a production. If you look at the entertainment industry, movie stars make millions of dollars. If you look at the sports industries, the top level sports people, they make millions of dollars.
more than a whole ballet company.
If you look at like the top ballet stars in the world right now, I mean, if you look at like New York City Ballet, I think the highest paid dancer is something like $250,000 a year, 300,000. I haven't checked that in a couple of years, so don't hold me to that. But that shows you the great inequity when it comes to resources. And then for the dance world to be mostly based in live performance, to try to turn it into something else, and for every aspect of that live performance to still want to be paid, when the dancers are center stage, the dancers are the product and everybody else supports that product. But the dancers are often the least paid of everything. And then when the media thing happens, then everybody wants to be paid the same. And then the companies end up, it's something's wrong with the system. And I don't know if we're ever going to be able to get enough. For me personally, I don't know if we're ever going to be able to get enough financial support in the arts to be able to find a solve. I do think that this is going to be an eternal conversation. I think that some people will be able to break the mold and be able to move forward, but I do think that this is not like we're sitting here talking about it in 5 years. You and I can sit and talk about it again and be like, wow, we were talking about this and look how much has changed. I think that things will change, and I think that people will find pathways, but I still think this is going to be a problem unless we find ways to support the arts in the same way that we support television, movies, and sports.
I think we can. I think we will, actually. I think this is all a big wake-up call for us, and it just goes back to the fact that like I said, I've been able for years since I was a kid to be able to watch my favorite basketball team or football team on TV. I've never been able to watch ballet or opera. And I think now we're going to be finally reaching out to massive audiences the same way sports have been doing for decades. And that's going to bring a lot more appreciation, a lot more interest, and that will eventually filter into the system, and people will want to pay more for tickets to the ballet, or people will want to pay a little bit of money to watch a live stream performance. It's just a matter of sort of how we finagle it to a way to where it still supports the main aspect, which is the live performance. But, I'm also of the opinion that, it's a fact. People in the dance world forever have said, if we offer ballet on TV, because I remember hearing about this when I was a kid. I'm like, why isn't ballet on TV? And they're like, if we do that, then nobody's going to come to the theater. You can watch the Seattle Seahawks on TV. You think you can get a ticket to the stadium? Forget it. Not unless you're a billionaire. I mean, that thing is packed. You're not getting a ticket, man. So broadcasting sports on TV has not taken away the aspect of live performance. And I think the same can be said for live theater and ballet. It's not going to grow suddenly and massively. We're going to have to develop it and cultivate it slowly over time. But I could see ballet companies and opera companies being much more represented in media. And think about it this way. You can fit 2,000 people in an opera house on any given night. So how much money are you going to make off those tickets? If you open that up for performance up to live streaming on the internet and you charge $1, 50 cents, if you have how many thousands of people watching on any given night, that's an extra amount of money. But more importantly, that's way more attractive to sponsors.
Yeah.
then you're getting more numbers that are more similar to the sponsorship of sports. And I think that's
I really
way
do
more.
hope you're right. Yeah, I think that being the ballet world is very much set in tradition. That's why it's taken so long for us to get to this point. And I think that I don't know if you feel this way, but I feel like ballet dancers tend to be more skeptics. Like we're almost taught to fear the evolution than we
Yeah.
are to just embrace it. I mean, I've thrown myself into so many different positions like that in the past, so I'm not afraid of that like uncomfortable place. But sometimes my brain still lags behind a
Well,
little bit.
we're traditionalists. I mean, we're taught since we're kids the tradition of ballet. You know, this is how they did it when Agrippina Vaganova was teaching. You know, that's still relative. It's still now to us. That's 100 years ago, and for us now, it's like no, that she's the one. She was the great teacher. We follow her
Yeah,
words. You know, we're traditionalists, and in many ways that served us well, and in many ways it hasn't.
yeah,
So, I mean, I really look forward to us as a society, as an art form, as an industry, of saying what is our tradition, what is a good piece of our tradition that really needs to be held onto and cherished and remembered, and what are traditions that could maybe kind of fall to the side a little bit. You know, I think we really need to pick and choose now as a community to say how can we move forward from here, because there are a lot of options. There's, you know, I've been looking heavily into different technologies to see how we can apply these technologies to the arts, and they're there. They're already developing them for primarily for sports, for music, but for tons of different types of art and live entertainment. And they're really there's going to be a massive revolution coming fairly quickly as a result of some of these technologies, but nobody's applying it to the performing arts yet. And and this revolution is coming, so I'm really curious to see how we can all apply these technologies
yeah.
for how we can use them.
One thing that I would love to see, the entertainment industry for so long has benefited, and we've added so much. Sorry, they benefited from the dance community, and we've added so much color to different productions, different shows, different movies. But for some reason, the entertainment industry often brings the dance industry into their place, but it's so infrequent that we actually see the entertainment industry come to us.
Yeah,
And
you do it sort of tokenish, you know.
yeah, so it's like we are always there to better the entertainment industry, whereas they have all of that figured out. I'd love to see a collaboration from a major entertainment guru in LA, somebody to come in and try to, like, even if it was like started with like a panel conversation, just to see like how they think or if they think it's possible for the dance world to use some of the systems in place that the entertainment industry has set up to benefit them when it comes to production and mass, like what's the word I'm looking for? Mass. Thank you, distribution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they'd be more than happy to just, I haven't really spoken to any high ups in the entertainment industry, but you know, a lot of people that are working in technologies are like the company that I'm talking about, Coil. They're working with several companies in Los Angeles, music producers and stuff like that. And they are working on some really revolutionary stuff, and what applies for them would apply for us as well. So I'm very curious to keep an eye on it and see where they're going with it. But for me personally, I'm working heavily with this interledger protocol, and this really disintermediates a lot of things. It allows for the transfer of value directly from consumer to producer, bypassing all of the intermediaries, allowing for all that value to go back to the producer themselves. And I think this is one of the most important steps, is sort of disintermediating and cutting out middlemen where they're not necessary, making complicated processes of fundraising and new sources of revenue much easier and more simple. And it's all out there. Like I said, it's being done. It's just, it's time for us as an industry to embrace it and start utilizing it, and realize that this could really revolutionize how we operate as an industry. And
Yeah. I mean, and it's, I hate this like cliche idea that when something bad happens to you, something good happens. Like when I got fired from Ballet X, yeah, I wouldn't be where I am today if that horrible situation hadn't transpired. Am I grateful that it happened to me? No, it was awful. But it was definitely one of those things that was an impetus to, honestly, I probably would have ended up in company life and not have developed all these different things that have gotten me to the point where like I have my own company, I write for these publications and whatnot. So I'm really hoping that with this COVID-19 pandemic, no, I'm not grateful for it. Like I am not grateful that this happened. I live in Queens. I know tons of people that got sick. I know a couple people that have died. It's been awful. But if anything, I am at least grateful that there is something positive that can come out of it for the arts world, because there will also be a lot of very sad things that are going to come out of it as well. But this could be revolutionary. Every time something major happens in the world like this, the world changes. And like we said, the arts is very slow to change. And I really am hopeful that this, I've heard the word catalyst over and over again. I really hope that this is the catalyst that really projects the dance world to be able to be accessible the way that it should be accessible, and also to be treated the way that it deserves to be treated. Because like I said, those numbers salary wise are just they're very representative of how undersupported the dance community is compared to like high level athletes and entertainment. And we are entertainment, we just aren't that type of entertainment. And it's not like it's like a 20% difference or 100% difference. It's like thousands of percentage of difference when it comes to support.
Yeah. Well, wow. Yeah, I was going to say, do you have any, like, because we kind of got to wrap it up. This is already, I think, by far the longest video cast I've done yet.
I know, I have to go grocery shopping too.
Well, cool. Yeah, because I really want to continue this conversation, but for now, yeah, you just had a great way to wrap it up. But is there anything else you'd like to say? You know, is there just one thing you'd love to just say to the dance world, the theater world, bam, you know, as a result of, or just anything?
Yeah. One thing that I wrote about at the very beginning in an article was dancer resilience. And it was frustrating me at the time because, like I said, I felt like people were reacting and we weren't pausing. But that's how dancers are. We are probably some of the most resilient people in the world because we choose every day to challenge ourselves both physically and mentally in ways that most other people don't. And I know that this is a very horrible time that we're living in. There's going to not just be loss in people, but there's also going to be loss in organizations. And it's going to be very sad. And luckily we have the legacies, but at the same time, it's going to open up new opportunities for people and organizations that maybe wouldn't have had those opportunities. And in the same time, media-wise, it's opening up this conversation, which I would have never thought about having 4 months ago. I would have never thought that I would be entering day 77 of quarantine, sitting here talking to you in Amsterdam from Queens. But I think that, like I was saying, while it's such a horrible situation and I'm not happy that it's happening, I'm not grateful for it in any way. If anything can come from it, I think that our resilient community will have the ability to do it. And I hope that this will push us to push ourselves further and out of our comfort zone to speak out and to call out the system that is set in place that is barely functional.
Wow. Bravo. I think that's the best way to end it. Great, man. Well, it was really good to talk to you. I think we should continue this conversation again.
Absolutely. I would love to.
Yeah, great. Well, take care. Big hug to Dan. And yeah, let's talk again soon, man.
Stay healthy. Take care.
All right. Ciao, man.
Bye-bye.